dieting doesn't work. What works is actually giving your body what it needs, which turns out includes fat.
Yes. Nobody told you that.
No. Is pleasure supposed to be a part of eating? Well, of course it is. But what do we mean by pleasure, right? The burger and fries and heavy beer, the pleasure is a fleeting pleasure. It's actually not a pleasure that makes my body feel at its best, right? I know things were deeply wrong with how I was approaching food. I know that. And I've learned from my experience with alcohol and the 2 different approaches to weight loss that I've taken, how much better I feel when I make the right choices.
So how much better can you feel? That's the question.
Why am I sharing all this? It's not to get my resentments out. It's to share that there is another way.
Hi, Margarita.
Hi, Tammy.
I've seen you before somewhere.
I think right here.
Yes, right here. That's right. This is our second podcast.
Second podcast in the studio, plus the one we did on Zoom.
Yeah. So today we're going to have a talk, discussion about some dietary issues, some ways to live a better life, probably. Yeah. So let's get to it.
Yeah, I suggested this topic because a theme that came up in our earlier podcast is the unity of body and soul. And what has been interesting for me in my spiritual journey is to realize that unity of body and soul includes the dietary practices, right? I was used to thinking of dietary practices as having a role in maybe how much I weighed or general nutrition. But it was really only in my 40s when I began to struggle with controlling what I eat and what I drink that I began to really examine the patterns and the habits of mind that were leading to overdrinking and overeating, and then realized that these patterns of overdrinking and overeating were a barrier to my spiritual life. And it was humbling to admit that I needed help on this front.
How would it get involved in your spiritual life?
Well, I was so busy with my work as a tenured professor and starting a nonprofit, living on my own, that I longed for a way and a time to relax. And I would turn to food and drink to just kind of like be comatose on Friday night in front of the couch, not realizing that when I did that, I wasn't really restoring my soul or my spirit. And I would be sluggish the next day, and prayer seemed really hard, like God seemed far away, and I was just distracted, constantly distracted.
When did you realize that?
I realized something was wrong when probably around 2018 or so, because on the outside, everything looked good, right? I had this beautiful home in Princeton. I had a thriving career. I had all kinds of opportunities opening up, but I had this interior unrest that I couldn't explain. Was it because I was single at the time? I'm now married in my late 40s. Was it because I was single that I was unfulfilled? Was it, what was it? And it was what turned my attention to dietary practice. Well, first of all, I had put on weight. And, I didn't look bad and people didn't think I looked bad, but I come from a family of people who have serious problems of overeating to the point of really affecting their health. I attribute that in part to the fact that my mom came from Cuba with her 14 siblings and they experienced a lot of hunger. And so within my mom and her cousins, there's just some maladaptation around food. But what happened with me was that in my late 30s, I called off a wedding, lost my job, was denied tenure, had to move to a new place, had to sell my house for a loss, and ended up in a great situation living in a dorm at Yale. Oh, but 3 meals a day were included with my rent. And to get away from the students, I would just go out to eat. And cooking at home didn't do it anymore. And so my life revolved around satiating myself with food to distract myself from my deep loneliness. And once I had fallen into those habits, I found it extremely difficult to change. And I had put on weight. And then one summer, I decided that I was going to humble myself and join Weight Watchers and join a workout program. And when I did that, it worked. And the reason it worked was that I actually just felt better generally.
What do you think it was about it that made it work?
Well, I was eating way too many burgers and fries and like heavy foods and wasn't eating enough fresh food, proteins, vegetables, and I was supplementing the food with moderate amounts of alcohol, which I thought was no problem. You know, the whole goal is to be moderate when it comes to alcohol. But I'll tell you what really got me thinking about the connection with the spiritual life and what we put in our bodies was alcohol. Because a year after I lost the weight, I saw a friend posted on Facebook that she had done this thing called the alcohol experiment. It's a book called the alcohol experiment. And that she had fasted from alcohol for 30 days and then did a 100-day fast and then quit and didn't want to drink anymore.
100-day fast.
100-day.
From alcohol?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fast from alcohol. Sorry, just from alcohol.
Yeah.
So I bought this book and I decided to do the 30-day fast from alcohol. And part of the experience is journaling your thoughts every day. And what I realized in doing that was that thoughts about food and alcohol were distracting me constantly. So that even if I wasn't drinking so much that I needed to be in AA, you know, or go into recovery of some sort, I was letting myself be distracted by food and alcohol. And when I wasn't drinking at all, I realized that I was more attentive to my own interior life and I was more attentive to the things around me. Even one drink, because I did the 30-day fast and then I drank again for a couple months. Then I did a 100-day fast and I never drank again. But in that interim time, I realized, wow, just 1 or 2 drinks of alcohol and it just numbs my senses, which is what it's supposed to do. It's what it's designed to do.
Yes.
But then I'm not as attentive to the beautiful landscape or the sunset, or I'm not as attentive to the person in front of me, and I'm not as attentive to my own spiritual life. So the reason I stuck with the alcohol fast, made it permanent, was that I'm just more alive, interiorly and exteriorly. And I thought, how come nobody told me this? How come everybody says alcohol's good for you?
Right.
And if you think you can't control your alcohol, then you belong in Alcoholics Anonymous, which I didn't belong there.
Right.
But how come nobody even presented this to me? And the other reason I care about this, Tammy, is that I worked with young people, and the amount of alcohol they consume on top of prescription medications, on top of over-the-counter medications, and I just realized like their bodies are just going through this roller coaster, and no one's telling them this is not a good idea.
Right. I don't drink. I've never drank heavily. When I was a teenager, I overdrank a couple of times. Didn't go well. You know, especially when I was very young and got drunk the first time. I had no idea what alcohol did to me. So I was pretty discombobulated. And I think my friend ended up having to carry me and put me in bed. Right. And I thought if I didn't get sick, I probably shouldn't even have this stuff, because I should have got sick with however much I drank. So I never really had much to do with alcohol, but I did have some all the time, you know, just some. But now I don't have any. And partly I don't have any because I travel quite a bit and I talk to all sorts of people, and I can't be, I have to be attentive. I have to be attentive and I have to be on point as much as I can be. And alcohol just dulls you a little bit, right? It just makes you a little less careful. So you might say things that are not quite as careful as they might be. And so we just decided it wasn't worth it. It just wasn't worth it.
Well, I wish someone had told me that, because the advice I got was, alcohol would make you better at socializing because it'll loosen you up. Whereas what was really happening was I'd be more blunt, you know?
Yeah, right.
Or I'd be more impatient. And so I didn't talk about this publicly really until now. It's been about 5 years. It's because I was ashamed of people thinking I might have been an alcoholic. You know, as soon as you say you've quit drinking, like people's, you know,
assume that.
Their radar goes up. And so now I'm in the next stage of this journey, which is looking at what I eat. I've managed to keep the weight off, most of it. So that's a good outcome.
It is
5 years of losing, 30 to 40 pounds.
That's a lot. You know,
but I still wasn't feeling good. Something still wasn't right. And I would still kind of splurge. I was still a little bit yo-yo. You know, I would splurge on food and then restrict my calories and lose it again.
Right.
And I sort of was like almost settling into this mentality that that's just how I'm going to live my life. I'm just going to be on the roller coaster for my whole life. I know I can diet and lose it. So let me just go have fun. But that started wearing me out. And when I got married, my diet changed because now there's 2 of us eating at home. And I just felt like I didn't know what the best choices were for both of us, or, you know, how do we do this? My whole life kind of around food changed. So what happened there, Tammy, that again hinted to me that, wow, all along what I've been eating affects my spiritual life, was when I signed up for a weight program. It's sold as a weight loss program, but I was doing it more for maintenance. It's by a woman called Molly Zemek. And what I learned in talking to her and reading her book and listening to her podcast.
What's her book called? Or her
Molly
podcast?
Zemek is her name. Weight Loss for Food Lovers.
Okay.
She was an executive chef, and anyway, knows a lot about gourmet foods. But what she taught me, which no one else had taught me until then, was that dieting doesn't work. What works is actually giving your body what it needs, which turns out includes fat.
Yes. Nobody told you that up till now.
No.
Right. Well, fat was demonized, right? Fat was completely demonized in the 70s, like a long time ago, right?
That's my whole life.
Yeah, that's your whole life. Right.
I was shocked. And so what she encouraged me to do was make sure that at every meal I had protein and fat. And when I did that, suddenly my metabolism seemed to change. And you know what I noticed, Tammy, was that I wasn't constantly giving into cravings and satiating myself. And when I let myself get into this regular rhythm of eating healthy food, but with fat, healthy meaning like freshly cooked and, you know, with a nice flavor, something that I really enjoyed, I was actually better able to pray because I wasn't walking into my prayer time feeling sluggish from that indulging dinner I had had last night. And I thought, wait a minute, what have I been missing all along? Like, I can eat fatty foods and feel satisfied and sleep better and
Did you
pray
sleep better?
I was going to bed not being stuffed, you know?
Right. So you were comfortable going to bed.
Yeah.
That way you were sleeping.
No one ever had told me that before. Yeah. Like, why am I like snacking on, you know, peanuts and chips between 8 and 10 p.m. and then going to bed?
Right, right. Well, you know, I've been waking up at 3 a.m. for the last, I don't know how long, quite a while. And I listened to a woman who's, you know, taking great care of her diet. And she said that she was waking up at 3 a.m. I thought, oh, I should listen to this. She said that she started eating fattier cuts of meat and then she slept through the night. And I thought, oh, is that so? So I tried it and I slept through the night. I was very surprised. So
that is very surprising. I mean, again, look, the reason I'm sharing this with you and with the listeners, look, don't take it from me. Try this yourself, right?
Yes.
But if you're feeling like I was, sluggish from overeating or overdrinking, and by overdrinking, to overdrink, you really only need, you know, 1 or even 2 glasses. For me, overdrinking is now anything. But if you're feeling sluggish on the weekends or your body just doesn't feel like it's processing food right, give it a try. Try changing something in your diet.
When you say your body isn't processing food right, what do you mean by that?
Well, like digestion feels kind of uncomfortable, you know, like I went out, it was great. I had a nice time. We had a cream tea in England with, you know, all kinds of sweets. And the digestion, I just felt like I'm like shaking from the sugar and I'm sitting on the couch and, you know, I have to let it pass. But I used to feel that way all the time, Tammy.
I see.
So much that I don't even think it was.
Yeah,
and so much that I didn't even think it was odd. I thought, oh, this is just what happens after you eat.
Right, right.
What doesn't happen after you eat food that's actually really good for you. I don't feel like slouching in the couch, you know?
Yeah, right.
After a good meal.
Yeah, you don't feel, yeah. Well, you know, when I only eat meat. So when I eat, it doesn't make any change. I don't feel sluggish. I don't feel full, right? So I don't feel anything like overly full or sluggish. I just feel that now I've had something to eat and I can do the next thing. I just do the next thing and I don't feel like I have any ill effects from what I ate. But I had lots of trouble with my diet and, you know, lots of trouble with stomach aches when I was a kid. And so I've always had a lot of digestive trouble. So, and I wouldn't say my digestion's fixed now, but way better. Way better.
The other reason I knew I was in trouble, why am I talking about this, Tammy? I think it's because there's no question in my mind that we live in an oversaturated culture of alcohol and food. And frankly, I thought that included
and
fat.
material things, like everything, right?
Well, today I went for a walk and I went into a grocery store and I was tantalized by all the ginger cookies and the packaging. And then I remembered what I learned in these two programs, the Alcohol Experiment and Weight Loss for Food Lovers. And I got a Diet Coke, which is what I went in to get. And then when I walked out, I saw these beautiful flowers. And I thought, what if my desire for food is actually a desire for variety, for color,
for beauty,
for beauty, right? Is that ginger cookie or that loaf of bread? So I thought, well, maybe when I get home, I should get some indoor plants, or maybe I should get some flowers in the house. Why does that momentary turning towards food, why do I think that's going to fulfill me? Is there something spiritually wrong with me giving into that? Now, I'm not saying any of those individual foods are wrong in and of themselves, but how is it that I've adopted this mentality of just, I wanted it all. I want everything in that store, and I don't want to feel sick, and I don't want to gain any weight, and I want to eat all of that.
Right. Those two things that doesn't compute, does it?
No. But is it a serious spiritual battle? Gluttony and overdrinking?
Gluttony is a sin. Gluttony is a sin.
Why? Why do you think it's a sin?
Why is it a sin? I guess what happens is your attention goes to food instead of to God.
But don't we need food to survive? Is this just another repressive mechanism of Christianity?
Food to survive.
Aren't we supposed to enjoy it?
I don't know if that's all that important. You want it to be good quality food, but is it the enjoyment of the food or the enjoyment of being with someone while you're eating? Now that's enjoyable, right? That's the enjoyment. People don't do very well to eat alone, and that might have been part of your problem too, as you were alone eating. And I don't do very well when I'm alone. It's better if I go and I eat with someone or invite somebody over than if I eat alone. Sometimes I don't eat if I'm alone, and that's not good either. So community has, it's something about community, sharing nutrition or sharing nourishment together. And you want it to be fresh, and you want it to be, you want to feel good after you've eaten it. But does it have to have an extra, like sugar kind of rush? Does it have to? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, Tammy, I went and looked up what Thomas Aquinas had to say about when I was doing this
that was a good idea.
And he says two things that are related to what we're saying, that on the one hand, gluttony is sinful because it's a lack of moderation, right? So when I said, is pleasure supposed to be a part of eating? Well, of course it is. But what do we mean by pleasure, right? The burger and fries and heavy beer, the pleasure is a fleeting pleasure. It's actually not a pleasure that makes my body feel at its best, right? Mm-hmm. So if what I'm eating is measured by how does my body feel at its best, those momentary pleasures are not really what Thomas Aquinas means by, so we're not supposed to be avoiding pleasure, but we're supposed to be avoiding the lower pleasures of the instantaneous rush, which actually is not good for our system. And our body is designed to give us pleasure from eating the right foods. So there's no problem with pleasure. It's the lack of moderation that Thomas Aquinas says is a sin, which I take to mean that I'm wrong to think that the short-term pleasure in eating a bag of Doritos is the same as the pleasure in eating a steak. My body is directing me to the kind of pleasure that's good for it in the long term, and I'm ignoring that. Mm-hmm. And that's a lack of self-control. So part of overeating, the obvious answer, is a lack of self-control. The second thing he said, which I'm not going to lie, I suffer from, and I went through today, is that we spend a lot of time thinking about the fanciness of the food and the presentation. And there can be an almost kind of like endless obsession with, oh, well, this piece of, chicken cordon bleu, it's kind of like Frasier. Have you seen, the show Frasier, where they're like overly talking all the time about just how fine their caviar is. And, this duck was raised in this way. And so Thomas Aquinas says that like obsession about the origin of food or the look of food or the smell of food or the taste of food is idolizing the food.
Right. Putting it first.
Yes. Yeah. And making it out to be something much, much more. So the fruit of struggling with gluttony, I think, is what you said. We put food back into where it belongs. It's nourishing our body. It's creating a bond with other people. The focus is the people. The food is the nourishment. And so I realized, well, gluttony really is a sin. And if I'm giving into gluttony, then maybe I'm distracted spiritually in other ways. And maybe my body can't really pray. Your friend who came to meet us for dinner last night, she read my blog about how when I went on a retreat, I was afraid the nuns were going to starve me. So I went to Five Guys and Fries and had double patties and, triple the fries and 2 giant things of Diet Coke. And I absolutely stuffed myself.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I don't know why, Tammy, but then I showed up and there's tons of lovely food there, but I couldn't pray for 24 hours because my stomach was it wasn't good for me.
Yeah.
Why do I do these things to myself? Why do I make the intention to go on a 3-day retreat and ruin one day of it with Five Guys and Fries? Because my stomach was rumbling from all that, I could not still myself interiorly to pray for 24 hours.
That's quite a long time. And so it was after that you made
Well, I still do these kinds of things, so I keep going. I keep going. The real resolution was to quit alcohol, which turns out to be way easier for me than quitting sugar. I'm pondering now why I can't quit sugar.
I think it's harder than alcohol to quit. I really do.
Harder because it's
everywhere and if I had a sip of whiskey, I could do this experiment. I could have a teaspoon of honey one day and see what kind of cravings came up the next day, and I would definitely have cravings. I've done it before. I start to crave potato chips. I start to crave. I dream about donuts, but I don't know why, because I can't eat a donut. I can eat potato chips, so that's kind of at least it's a doable craving. But if I had a shot of whiskey, would I crave it the next day? I don't think so. So I think that sugar is even more of a problem than alcohol. Just on a once off experiment.
It's certainly more difficult for me. I mean, there's no question it's more difficult for me.
I think it's difficult for people. And, I don't eat any. So all I eat is meat. But for most of my life, I ate vegetables and fruit. And for a long time, I ate bread and everything else before I figured out that it helped me not to eat those things. But now that I don't eat anything but meat, I look at people who are eating sugar, especially children, and I see them, they'll sit down to dinner and ask for what's for dessert before they even take a spoonful of dinner. And if there's no dessert, well, then there's disappointment at dinner because they're only eating dinner because they want dessert. Or if they ask for cookies, you've seen kids in stores because they put the bubble gum like right on the bottom shelf and all the chocolate bars and everything. So a little kid comes in and he wants a candy and his mother doesn't give it to him. And he gets this kind of terrible, whiny face. I think that's a sugar monster. I don't even think it's the child. I think that's sugar telling this poor little kid, get more sugar in you, because I do believe that it's a powerful need to have glucose in our system if we're metabolizing glucose all the time. Because I don't metabolize glucose anymore. I metabolize ketones, right? And some of those ketones turn into glucose where your system needs glucose. So I have glucose inside me. But if I take a teaspoon of honey, then it's on my tongue. and then I crave it. Otherwise, I don't crave it at all. I can go through the stores, and the thing is, you go to pay for whatever it is you came in for or something, and they just line it with cookies and chocolate bars, and it's amazing. It's amazing what's there and you're standing in line, so you have no choice. There you are looking at the different types of chocolate and the different types of cookies, and you're just standing there. It's no wonder people grab them. They're just standing there. So it's like, eat me, eat me, eat me. These foods are just, eat me, eat me, eat me, eat me, and it doesn't quit. I think it's evil.
Well, I guess
I don't know why.
I used to be in the camp that, like, let everybody make up their own mind. The principles are, do what's good for your body, moderation. Don't rule out food groups. That's what I used to say. Don't rule out food groups because, I don't know, if ruling out all sugars and all breads and all, I hear about, there's so many different approaches, you know?
Yeah.
And I've been asking my friends since I've started doing this weight management program, Weight Loss for Food Lovers, I've been asking other people, well, how do you, there's no perfect system, right? So how do you select the higher, for some people, it's got to be all organic. Mm-hmm. For some people, it's, only meat. For some people, it's this, for some people, it's that. Of all the possible choices you could have about what it means to eat healthy, how do you prioritize that?
Well, it's how you feel, right? That's what you've learned. It's how you feel. Is your mind clear? Have you limited the pain in your body?
Mm-hmm.
How's your digestion? All these things. How are your relationships?
You think food has to do with how good our relationships are?
Yeah, I do. How much patience mothers have for their children? That's probably got to do with just how nourished you are. How patient you're going to be. It made you jittery, right?
Oh,
the
for
food?
Sure.
Well, you're going to be less patient if you're jittery than if you're calm. Right?
Well, I'm new on this journey, Tammy.
Yes, yeah, fair enough.
So, I did write down some questions I have for myself and my body because for the last 48 hours, due to your influence.
Yeah, my influence.
Your influence. I have not had carbs or sugar. I've been focusing on sugar, but I realized that I've probably gone 48 hours in the past without sugar because I don't always have bread or pastries every day. Certainly there's 48 hours. Probably haven't gone 48 hours without sugar or carbs because carbs includes fruits and vegetables, and I always like snacking on fruit or eating fruit and vegetables. It's hard for me to imagine that I've had a strict carnivore diet, even for 48 hours, ever in my life.
Right. How do you feel?
I feel...
It's kind of early, I know, but...
I feel satiated, but not stuffed.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say that I've had any notice of digestion going on. If it's going on, it's going on in the background. Mm-hmm. I came over here to be with you from England, so I was on a long flight, time zone change.
Yeah, 5 hours, is it?
5 hours.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was a long day just because I had to change planes in Newark, so it was a long travel day. Mm-hmm. And I have felt a little sleepy at times, but not like I'm just crashing entirely. And I have slept well.
For the last 2 nights.
Yeah, for the last 2 nights. Not waking up on, England time. And when I do wake up once or twice at night, being able to get back to sleep quickly. Now, I do generally sleep. So I say I sleep well, but one of the reasons I'm curious about this is I say I sleep well, but I don't wake up rested. Mm. And so I have some questions for myself that I'm going to be seeking. If I try to change my diet again by really giving a sugar fast for 30 days and maybe a sugar and carb fast, which would turn me in the carnivore diet, I would like to see if I sleep better.
Yeah.
If I was jotting down some difficult situations that I know I'll have to face in the next 30 days and wondering if I can face them, like right now, how I feel having been around you. I feel just kind of calm and peaceful. And if problems come, I'll just, resolve it. Mm-hmm. But as I was telling you yesterday, when I get upset about things, my body clenches up and my jaw clenches. And, so I'm willing to consider making even further changes because I know things were deeply wrong with how I was approaching food. I know that. Mm-hmm. And I've learned from my experience with alcohol and the 2 different approaches to weight loss that I've taken how much better I feel when I make the right choices.
So how much better can you feel? That's the question.
I never thought that was possible.
Right. Neither did I. All this has come out as quite a shock. I've been on this diet for 7 years, but it's still kind of shocking that I'm on this diet, because it's kind of a radical thing not to. I mean, as far as we know, for a very long time, people have been eating fruits and vegetables. Historically, it's not that long, actually.
Is that right?
Yeah. If you look back in history to Cro-Magnon and all those early men, they were hunting animals. They were eating animals. That's what they were eating. So, and then eventually they stopped wandering and set up a home, and that's when they started with grain and everything, because you had to take care of your grains. And so it was only when people stopped hunter-gathering and started an agricultural society that they started eating plants. They were eating meat, fish. That's what they were eating. Maybe they were eating berries, some things along the way, but that's it. You have to kind of sit still to eat plants because they don't move. If they could move, they would move, though. If plants had legs, they'd run from us because they don't want to be eaten. But they don't. They put poisons in themselves instead.
But I guess I always thought it was a good thing that we developed agriculture, because it allowed us to settle in one place and not have to go out and hunt each meal. I mean, isn't that a good thing that we don't you don't go out and hunt the meat that you eat?
No, I don't.
Somebody else is raising it for you.
I'd probably be in better shape if I did.
Or maybe there wouldn't be enough to go around. Maybe it's not very efficient. Maybe it's not realistic.
Well, I know that in the hunter-gatherer societies, there was always the best hunter, and the men would all go with him, but they shared their food. They definitely always shared their food, because sometimes the best hunter isn't going to get a kill, and if he hasn't shared his food, nobody's going to give him anything. So they shared their food, for sure. So, there's going to be somebody who's going to get an animal, and they're going to share it with everybody. That was community. So even when they were hunter-gatherers, they were sharing their food. So it wasn't each man for himself. It wasn't like that at all.
Well, I guess I'm also trying to avoid, the other extreme, right? That if I follow this exact plan, then I'm going to have this amazing feeling in my body all the time, and I'm going to be perfectly closer to God. Those kinds of promises always strike me as overstated, right?
Yeah. I do feel, though, that I have a much more single purpose now, because I eat meat and I drink water. So it's very, very simple. And it's so simple that I can spend my time on what is more important, my spiritual life, really. And not just my spiritual life, but also the next right thing, which might be a very challenging thing. And so, but I want to be ready so that I notice what the next right thing is, so that I can take action. So I don't want to be distracted by that I'm sleepy, or that I'm drunk, or that I'm overly full and not wanting to do anything or go anywhere, pay attention to anybody. Like that's just not effective, right? So, and I know now I'm not eating for myself. I'm eating for the betterment of mankind. So I want to do something good for the world. And I want to be in the best shape I can do it. And I think that this is allowing me, and I'm just speaking for myself, allowing me to be more effective.
Wow.
Yeah, and I do think so. I think it's a very strange it's a very strange place that I'm at now. I didn't expect it. Right? But when you do things by how you feel, you get places you didn't plan. And that's what's happened. I wanted to feel good. I always had a stomachache as a kid. And I wanted to feel good. And so I think that was a big goal in my life, was to be healthy. And so, and it brought me here. And my daughter was very ill, right? So I wasn't feeling well, and she was even sicker than me. which was terrible to be a mother and have such a sick child. And I made her, go to naturopaths. Whenever I found a new one, I took her there. So I put her on this journey of finding out how to solve her problems, but not just through the medical system, any way possible. And she eventually got on that journey. And that's how we got on the meat diet.
Well, that's what also got me going, was because in my 40s, I was in two different car accidents. One very high speed on the highway, hit by two cars. Oh, yeah.
That must have been just
terrible. I was
terrible.
hit by someone who had a seizure.
Oh.
And then hit by a second car. So,
oh dear.
But I sustained neurological damage to my spinal cord. I had swelling in the spinal cord and a displaced disc. And that was a year of no exercise, just recovery.
Mm-hmm.
But I could walk. But at that point, how many medications can I take? And, one of my acts of desperation is that I needed relief from the pain, but I was tired of the side effects of medication. So I'm there biting a pill in half because I don't want to take the whole pill. I think, what has become of me? Because you're managing what causes you to need the medications and you're managing the side effects of the medications.
Right.
And you think, when is this ever going to end? Is this ever going to end? This is no way to live, is what I thought as I'm biting that pill in half. Mm-hmm. So that's when I began to realize that, medicine is powerful and it can do amazing things, but you also have to pay attention to the stress that goes into your body and how you release toxins from your body. So that's when I started learning about eating better and stretching in certain ways, or how to treat the body holistically. And that helped me spiritually in the sense of when you've had chronic pain. I had a second car accident. I was walking across the street in Princeton and hit by a car. And
how fast were they going?
Not that fast, fortunately, because they had just turned a corner. But I got thrown.
But it's a car, and they're hard.
And you have no protection on your body or your head.
Wow, I can't imagine.
So, bruised my ribs from hitting the roof, landed on the right side of my body. I hit every bone in my body except for my head, which was a grace.
Thank goodness, huh?
And tore a meniscus in my right knee. And it's been 5 years. I've already had surgery and I'm still dealing with the pain. Mm-hmm. So again, it's the same thing. I'm glad I had surgery and I'm glad I had anti-inflammatories when I really needed it. Mm-hmm. But you can't be doing that for 5 years.
Right.
Right. And so both of those accidents made me realize the body has an incredible capacity to heal, but it needs rest and it needs nourishment. And I started looking around and going to different physical therapists and massage therapists. And I did find medical doctors who approve of this approach, because they know that surgery is limited in what it can accomplish. And they know that the patient's body has its own mechanisms of healing. And that I like to go to doctors who don't think that there's one thing that fixes it for everybody.
Right.
And who will, try this and see if it works. And if this doesn't work, then you try this.
Right.
And finding the mental and spiritual space to go through that struggle. I mean, I'm not the only one with chronic pain. I bet a lot of people listening and, but it's like, what do you mean? I'm 50 years old and I have to think, how long am I going to walk today because my knee hurts?
Yeah, that's,
I'm way too young to be thinking this. Mm-hmm. Way too young. And what am I going to be like when I'm 80? And I have all this mental frustration because I didn't hurt my knee myself. I was hit, and I never had this pain before. So I'm trying to deal with the mental and the spiritual element of living with chronic pain. And it's no fun.
No, that's right.
And as I was walking around recently, I just said to myself, I got to let Jesus carry this burden for me. And I'm going to keep seeking any way I can to heal. But in the meantime, being frustrated and being angry that I'm in pain isn't helping.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I've had to slow down. I can still work from home, but I can't travel as much because I needed to go into recovery for my knee 3 times a week.
Right. That takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that felt better. And, and I'm still back and forth, right? So I have to plan my life about how many appointments I need.
Yeah. Me too. I'm there too.
Really?
After having cancer, I have to have scans every now and then. And I have to do Pilates so that my scar tissue doesn't bother me. And I have to do it pretty much every day so that I can be pain-free. Yeah. And then there's the arthritis. So I can't eat anything else because as soon as I eat something else, I get arthritis again. So I'm stuck here.
See, even as I'm telling you all this, like the resentment is stirring up in me. You know, why am I sharing all this? It's not to get my resentments out. It's to share that there is another way.
Yeah, right. That's why.
That's why. And
there is another way. There's another way. And the thing is, it's worth a try. Maybe it won't work, but it's worth a try, and it won't harm you. And that's the thing. You know, people have demonized fat. They've demonized meat in order to sell grains, right? That food pyramid, that was a lie. That was the Department of Agriculture, so they could sell more grain. And, well, I think that we know that now. We know that now. It was a lie. And everybody, we all thought we were doing the best we could by living by the food pyramid. That was wrong. And so what do we do instead? Well, what I think we should do with people who have chronic pain, instead of filling them with drugs, is to put them on a meat diet and see if the symptoms go away. Just see if the symptoms go away. It's a month. It's a month of eating meat and drinking water. You know, I don't even know if you can complain about that. It's so tasty. It's hard to really complain about it. It's a big change. It's radical, but it's actually not unpleasant. Have you enjoyed the steaks we've had?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
there you go.
You know, because it's also not like a baby-sized portion, you know? It's not like...
No, it's a nice thick steak.
Thick steak and long. I mean, it's like at least 8 ounces, maybe 10 ounces when you put it in, and it comes out at about 8, you know?
Yeah. And we eat, what, twice a day?
Yeah. And I haven't been throwing away the fat. You know, usually I cut the fat off and put it on my husband's plate. I've been eating the fat.
And as you eat this more and more, you'll think it's necessary. You'll want it because you are metabolizing fat. It's the protein isn't as important. I've had, I saw a video of one of these carnivore people who's on the lion diet now. So he's only eating ruminant animal. So it's only steak, bison, deer, venison. It's just multiple stomach lambs. It's just multiple stomach animals for people who are very sick. That seems to work the best. And he went to the butcher and he got a whole package full of fat that they had cut off. And so he was buying stew meat and fat, and he was going to make a stew. The stew meat doesn't have much fat, so he was going to put extra fat in it.
Well, you know, I think what I'm learning is just, I thought what you said earlier was really wise, and that's something that I want to learn, that our lives have a goal, and our bodies are meant to experience pleasure. But as soon as whatever pleasure of the body becomes so big that it overtakes our larger goal, we've made a mistake.
Yeah, right.
So there's nothing about the way that you eat that sounds like you're punishing the body, right?
No.
Whereas people are, you know, people go to extremes to lose weight and deny themselves this and deny themselves.
I can eat 3 steaks a day if I want. I can eat 5 steaks a day if I want. But I don't want to eat all of that. If the steak isn't tasting yummy, then you don't need any more. You've eaten enough. That's how you decide you're full, because you're not going to feel bloated like you did before when you were eating carbohydrates. Oh, I'm full. I don't want to eat anymore. No, it's just the steak just doesn't have that experience that the first bite gives. And so if you have a steak and you can't eat the rest of it, well, then don't. Then don't. Doesn't matter, because you won't have an insulin crash, because your insulin and sugar is not going like this. You're just going like this all the time.
You know, you tell people, I'm going to make a joke here, Tammy. You tell people you converted to Catholicism because of the rosary. Maybe it's because of steak.
Maybe it's because of steak. Who knows? I don't know. I know they go together pretty well. I can focus on God.
Well, and it sounds like you have a clear sense that your life has a mission and a purpose.
Yeah.
And the food is not the priority in your life.
Right.
And what I was describing about myself is that food becomes a way to numb myself through food and alcohol, or distract myself. And therefore I can't be walking with God as much as I should be, because why would I do that? You know, what are the changes I'm being called to make? building more community, as you said, which eventually led to me getting married. And then with my husband, figuring out what are the foods that we both enjoy, and realizing that there's a give and take and a sacrifice and just discussions to be had about what are we going to buy and who's going to prepare it and how can we both be satisfied with what we're eating. Those discussions are well worth it. And it's just a matter of figuring it out. But I've been on my own for 48 years,
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so he's, by the way, very interested in this.
He is?
Yeah, he is.
What did he say when you told him you'd only eat meat for a day or two?
He said, well, you have this reputation for doing this. Our
I
friends
see.
have told us that. So I said, Tammy's only given me steak for the last 2 days.
I had salad in the fridge if you wanted it.
Yes.
So everybody knows.
Yes, but I kind of signed up to do it in community, to do this with you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that he said he wanted to try the diet with no carbs.
Cool.
But we talked about fish and yogurt and dairy. I thought it was just meat, but you can have cheese, you can have dairy.
Yeah, that's right. The carnivore diet's animal products. It's just animal products.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel good after that, then you go back to more of a lion diet, which is what I'm on, which is, not very many kinds of meat.
Okay.
It's pretty limited, right? But a carnivore diet it's not that limited. There's lots of animal products. There's chicken and pork and
lamb,
all kinds of fish and lamb,
ham,
and steak. Yeah, there's all kinds of pork.
And they all have different flavors and textures.
There's chicken wings. We used to love eating chicken wings. And I could probably still eat it, but chicken doesn't have enough fat in it for me. So it's just not as satisfying. And fish, I know I should eat either lamb or fish because there's omega-3s in it. And I ate only lamb for a year, so I think I've done my due diligence in eating lamb. But fish, I could eat more fish. A couple times a week I'd like to eat fish, but only once a day because I need some fat in my diet every day. So one meal should probably be something lamb. If I'm going to have a day that's omega-3, it'd be lamb and fish.
Well, so we talked about how to incorporate this method of eating with our kind of liturgical fasting, right? So we fast during Lent for meat.
Right.
So I said we would have to just do eggs and cheese and fish.
Right.
And he's like, okay, I think I could do that for 40 days.
Oh, that's good.
And I mean, I think he's interested in it just because, he's interested. He's curious and he wants to age healthy.
Yeah.
And at my encouragement, he's taken, the CPAP machine for his sleep apnea. And he just rests better and feels better. And so these adjustments we can make to our bodies and our lifestyles can make a huge difference. But he's also told me that fasting is part of the liturgical calendar, right? Mm-hmm. And that part of the traditions of Christian wisdom of fasting.
Yeah.
I used to think it's
why is it there, I wonder? Why do you think
to punish yourself? Because that's what Christians do. No, I'm just kidding. I think, so Jesus fasts, right?
Yeah.
He goes into the desert and he fasts for 40 days.
So he can be clear with what he's doing. Yeah.
And what does Satan try to tempt him with? Bread,
Oh, yeah.
Man does not live by bread alone, but by the word of God, right? Mm-hmm. So Jesus is saying there, we have to put God's will for our lives before satisfaction of the body.
Yeah.
Because and then the interpretation of that in the traditional Christian wisdom is that we have passions like hunger, desires for sex, desires for alcohol. But if we don't restrict them, they just come to control us, right? The passions become vices.
Right.
So none of the pleasures associated with the things that I just mentioned are not wrong in and of themselves, but they can come to take control of you.
Right.
And this is why we have, Sexaholics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. This is why people are addicted to all kinds of things,
They let them get up.
Because the body is never satisfied.
No.
So the ritual fasting is to prepare to enter into times of prayer. Mm-hmm. And during the times when you're fasting, you're also supposed to do more acts of service and give away part of your income, right? Give away something. So you're supposed to deny yourself and give of yourself. Mm-hmm. Now, interestingly, what the historian Peter Brown says about early monks is that when they denied themselves pleasure, it was always in search of a greater pleasure.
Right.
A more satisfying pleasure.
Yeah.
So it's not true that pleasure or the body is somehow demonized in Christianity. It's not. It's simply that these practices of liturgical fasting were to put a right order to those desires, and that by turning our attention to God, what we do with our bodies in the material realm has a more lasting pleasure.
Right.
And because we fall away, we do it on a liturgical calendar basis, and you do more of it during Lent, and there's a little mini fast during Advent. My husband and I try to fast from red meat twice a week, and so do fish and eggs and cheese.
That's probably good. Yeah.
Friday fast used to be fast from meat used to be obligatory for Catholics before I was born.
Yeah.
Nobody even thinks about that anymore.
But they don't, huh?
No.
Oh.
No.
I thought I was supposed to eat fish on Fridays. No.
It's not required.
But that used to be the practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
so
it's not
be the
required
practice.
anymore. And yet at the same time, you have all of these people who would not call themselves Christians who are really interested in food, the whole foodie movement, or if you go out to the West Coast, and people finding all kinds of spiritual meaning in what they eat and what they don't eat and where it comes from. And
that's right.
Yep, but the
right.
issue I have with that is that it's anthropomorphic. It's turning animals into humans.
Uh-huh.
And that's not what Christianity is. We're supposed to respect creation, but humans uniquely are created in the image of God. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, but your cow is not created in the image of God.
I wonder, because we pray before we eat. As Christians, we pray before we eat. And as Catholics, we pray before we eat. And there aren't as many people who are adhering to religion anymore. And I wonder if because people aren't praying before they eat, they start feeling guilty for eating meat. And that's why there's so many vegetarians now. That's just something I've thought.
I definitely think that to be thankful for what you're eating is what we're called to do as Christians. We're not called to feel guilty.
No.
But people are being told
because they're not praying.
But who's telling them to feel guilty about that?
Right. Who is? I don't know. Nobody. Nobody's telling them. It's a feeling that they have, I guess. Because otherwise, why would they be staying away from meat?
Well, I think what it tells us is that as humans, we instinctively know that we should be denying the body something.
Yeah.
And so all of these practices around food, look, a lot of it is driven by health. And people who I know who have gone to one extreme or another, they've had digestive problems or they've had, physical problems. But some of it is spiritual, that they know that there's a connection between the body and the spirit. And that if we deny the body something, we're stronger somehow spiritually.
Yeah.
And that intuitively is correct. Mm-hmm. But that intuition is leading people somewhere, but not in the direction, I don't think, of saying that we shouldn't be killing animals to eat them. That I don't agree with.
No, I don't agree with it. I just think that because they're not being thankful,
right?
Explicitly thankful, so that everyone in the room at the dinner table knows that they're thankful. So there's a prayer. Because there's no prayer, that when they pick up their knife and fork, they feel a little guilty about eating. And so then they wonder, well, maybe I shouldn't be eating this or that. I wonder. I wonder, because I think, we have left many people have left their faith. There's going to be consequences, and their consequences, we have no idea what the consequences are. And that's one aspect that might cause people to turn away from them feeling like it's a good idea to eat and to eat. And what are you going to harm the most? You think, well, it's an animal, so I'm not going to eat any animals because you're feeling guilty.
Well, I got into all this, as I was saying, at the time when I was living with undergraduate students at Yale, and I was dealing with my own health issues because of a car accident, my own overeating issues. And I was observing not so much the immoderation in food, I wasn't even thinking about that, but the immoderation with alcohol, marijuana, and prescription medications.
Right.
And so for people listening to this, it may sound like you and I are discussing radical things, giving up alcohol or giving up plants, but it is really important that people begin to think holistically about body and soul, to think about the impacts of what they put in their body. It doesn't only impact you the hour after you eat it. The foods and the way that we're eating has long-term effects. The reason I've done this is because I feel better physically, I have more energy, and I'm less anxious. And so if people are listening and thinking, that's impossible to give up alcohol, or it's impossible to give up everything other than meat, well, you're talking to people here who have done that and are better off for it. But at the very least, I also just wanted to point out that in the history of the church, fasting, as I was mentioning, liturgical fasting has always been a part of it, because we need to, as St. Thomas Aquinas says, one of our sins is gluttony. It's an immoderation of the passion to eat. And it's also an immoderation of the mind that's constantly being attracted to food. So you've talked about how free you feel because you're not thinking about food all the time. You're focusing on your family, you're focusing on your projects, and the food that you pick is delicious and it feeds your body and it prepares you to do what God's calling you to do. So I wanted to talk about this with you because you've made heroic choices, difficult choices that now seem like, how could I live any other way? And that's how I honestly feel about alcohol and how I feel about the food choices that I've made and I'm continuing to make. But I'm also continuing to struggle, especially around sugar. And so I'm very sympathetic to people who think this sounds impossible. But I do want to tell you that a different way of eating and a different way of approaching alcohol is possible for everybody.
It's possible, and it's worth the time you put into it. It's not going to hurt you to try. And things that got better for me, I never thought did. So that's another thing. So, take stock of how you feel. If you have a niggly problem with your knee, or if you have a niggly problem with your shoulder, or if you have, neck tension or headaches or whatever it is, just note them and then eat meat for a month and see if any of those things go away. And, we were talking to my assistant and we were talking about how much meat costs. And he said that he's only been eating meat and he actually felt like maybe it was actually costing a little less when you factor in how many other things you were buying before and you're not buying any longer. So
track it. See if it actually is more expensive.
That's right. And, I know meat costs more than it did because, for whatever reasons, meat is costing more right now. I don't think it'll stay that way because I think that they are arbitrary prices. I don't think it is necessary for the meat cost of food to have gone up so much. And so hopefully we'll get that all back in order and it won't be so expensive. But I'm not sure that this diet, I've heard from a number of people that it's not more expensive to eat this way because you don't eat as much, you don't eat as often. So there's that. And you don't eat a huge variety of things. So you don't have your cupboards full of all kinds of stuff or your fridge.
And maybe if I give up my $5 cappuccino every day, I can afford the meat.
You can afford to buy flowers for yourself.
Well, that's what I'm thinking of all the things I'm going to give up. I'm sort of joking, but people spend a lot of money on cigarettes and they spend a lot of money on alcohol.
Yeah, right.
If you think you can't afford meat, maybe ask how much you think you can afford on alcohol and why. How do you justify that? You can't justify buying meat, so people will put the money aside to buy the things for their body that they think their body really wants. Or what do people spend on creams or, candles, all kinds of things. So when we were talking about that as well, that part of what I think both of us have done is fill our senses in other ways. Scented candles or scented bathing oils. Those were all wonderful
flowers. Cut flowers for the kitchen.
Cut flowers.
There's lots of ways you can, your sense of smell gets better. So your sense of smell, well, I went to visit my dad when my dad was still alive. I went to visit him and his wife was making cookies. And of course I can't eat cookies, but I got to smell them all day.
That sounds great.
It was good. It was actually very good. And so you take the other senses besides taste, start to take more of the time, your visual sense, your auditory sense, and your sense of smell. They are heightened.
Well, you know what I do when I walk through a grocery store and I can't have that bottle of alcohol or I can't have this, I actually sometimes stop and look at it and think, oh, what a beautiful box and what a nice little design. Oh, I bet that smells great. But I'm not punishing myself for not having it. I'm actually admiring the things about it that are worthy of admiration. And then I think somehow I take that inspiration into something else in my life. Maybe I really like that color. Maybe I should have more color in my bedroom.
Right.
Maybe I should have, a little bit more smell somewhere in the house. But I don't feel like I have to avoid looking at alcohol or certain kinds of foods because they're so tempting and I have to sort of turn away from it. I can't control it.
No.
I just be present in the moment of what looks beautiful and attractive about that. And I move on. So sort of like you, smell all the cookies you want. They smell great, but you don't have to have one.
Yes.
We'll see, Tammy. I'm going to have to get back to you on this.
Okay.
This conversation is to be continued when I've gone a little further.
That's right. We'll revisit this.
Journey.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to share with you and with others why I've made these choices and how it's helped me.
Well, thank you.
Spiritually.
Thank you very much.